Something is shifting, something so big that it took me a little bit of time to figure out how to present this episode and all the ones moving forward. And I'll be honest, I wasn't sure what to talk about next because the last 2 months have been really crazy. And I just don't mean out there in the world, and I'm sure that you feel it too, but I mean in here and also in you. That quiet voice that keeps getting louder and louder, no matter how hard it is to turn away or turn down from it. The one that says the story that we have been handed, the one that we are told to believe in, to build our lives around, it's just not adding up anymore. And I think a lot more of us are keeping that to ourselves because we aren't quite sure how to say it out loud without sounding like we've lost it. So we scroll and we stay busy and we keep performing the life that we built. And we privately wonder, does anybody else feel this? And I'm here to tell you that I definitely do. I feel it too. Something is happening. Something is shifting, not only here in the United States, but around the world. And if you've been through the last 5 episodes, you already know a lot of my story. You know about 2019. You know about me waking up on the edge of everything and somehow still being here. I've talked before about how my suicide attempt wasn't my spiritual awakening exactly, but it was the beginning of waking up. It was the beginning of questioning the social norms and the political narratives and the handed down belief system that I have been running on autopilot my entire life. And in fact, I would assume many of you listening to this have also been running on autopilot. But today I want to go deeper than that. I want to go past the politics, past the religion, past the unpacking of what we did in episode 5. Because something else started happening in the spring and summer of 2025 to me. Something more personal, more internal, and it's a little bit more difficult to put into words. And it's a little bit more difficult to share publicly than most things that I've actually shared with you all, which is interesting because I've talked about some pretty deep stuff. But I want to take you on the next chapter of Woke Up Inside of Me. Not the version that questioned the world out there, but the version that finally got quiet enough to hear something in here. The space that reconnected me to myself, to the cosmos, to something that I can only describe as I am. So welcome to episode 6 of Colorful Pricks. For most of my life, I've been chasing something. Achievement, validation, the next thing that would finally make me feel like that I was enough. And for a long time, I didn't even question it. That's just what you do, right? You build a life, you check off the boxes. But here's what nobody tells you about the boxes. You can check every single one of them and still feel empty because the words are there to check off, but there's no real value behind them. No one warns you about that part. That you can do everything right and still feel like something essentially is missing. And my boxes finally tipped over in May of 2025 while I was in Greece. I was in Bodrum, Turkey, part of a longer trip that we were taking with friends. And on the morning of May 31st of 2025, I woke up at 5:34 a.m. And if you've been listening to this podcast for any amount of time, you already know my relationship with the number 34. No alarm woke me up. I just became awake. But I remember waking up and feeling something is different. Something inside of me felt different. It wasn't dramatic. It was not a lightning bolt moment. It was just a shift that I couldn't explain or ignore. And I remember having one of the most visual dreams I'd ever experienced. One that told me clearly, you are exactly where you need to be. That this was the time to anchor in my peace. And so I grabbed my phone and I wrote down the words that were coming through to me. I put, I surrender my timeline to something higher. I do not chase, I attract. What is meant for me is already on its way. I trust the calm, even when I don't understand it. My peace is not a pause, it is a portal. I couldn't believe how alive I felt in that moment, how real. like something was being shown to me specifically, that big things were coming and I needed to be ready to receive them. When I finally opened my eyes, the sun was just beginning to rise. The curtains in our cabin were drawn shut, but they had created this almost like perfect triangular shape opening at the top. And at the top, the sun, right at the tip of the triangle, was shining directly onto my face, casting the shadow and light across me. The point of light was like hitting I think it was my left eye. And I felt drawn to it. I felt energized by it. And so I took a photo in that exact moment because something in me knew this is significant. I just didn't have the full language for it yet. I told my wife and I told my partner, I told the friends that we were traveling with that I had this dream. I told them about the sunrise and the words that I had written down. I felt like a kid in a candy store. Whatever had just happened, I wanted more of it. And I remember getting on the deck of the boat and just feeling this sense of awe and wonderment. Like I was seeing the world for the first time. It just felt so interesting. But what I didn't know until much later is that when I started following solar activity and the Schumann resonance, it was around like 5 o'clock universal time that morning that the sun had erupted in one of the most significant solar flares of that year. It was Earth directed, and the electromagnetic field was measurably elevated all day. And here's something that's worth sitting with. Do you remember back in late 2025 when we had that massive solar event and the aurora borealis was visible as far south as Mexico? People who had never seen the northern lights in their lives were stepping outside in states where it had never appeared to them before. And something else happened around the same time. A wave of people started questioning things. They started feeling this quiet stirring, started asking harder questions about the world that they were living in. Coincidence? Maybe. I'm not going to stand here and tell you solar flares cause spiritual awakening. I can't prove that. Nobody can. But I can tell you that I felt something in Bodrum before I had any explanation for it. That information, that data came much later as I started diving deeper into our connectiveness and our electromagnetic energy and solar flares, frequencies, all of that. And I've never been able to stop thinking about that sequence because something was happening in the sky, something was happening in my body. So make of that what you will. But what I know for certain is that I came home very, very different from that trip. The noise of daily life, the routine, the grind, the performance of normalcy, it felt hollow in a way I couldn't unfeel. Because what I had touched in that cabin in Bodrum, in that dream, in that triangle of morning light, that was real. It was more real than life I was returning to. And I knew that something deeper was beginning to unfold inside of me, something beyond my personal healing, beyond the therapy and the questioning that I had already been doing since my suicide attempt in 2019. This was something entirely different. Because for most of my life, I hadn't trusted myself. I didn't trust my art, not my instincts, not my worth. I was always doing more, proving more, and performing more, trying to earn something I didn't believe I had already had. And Greece cracked that open. And what was waiting on the other side was a lot more unpacking than I expected. A complete relearning of who I was and what the universe actually has to offer. So much of my trip to Greece, I felt so deeply connected to. I don't know if it's the ancient worlds that we were walking around, but I felt deeply connected to where we were. So much so that the dreams were so intense the entire time that we were there, and then having this grand awakening awareness, almost as if I had walked into a room I had never been in before, and then the lights were turned on, and I couldn't stop looking. I couldn't stop seeing all the small little things, the flowers, the rocks, how they would have built these empires and what was happening and how deeply they were connected to self. When I got back from Greece, I began meditating, or what I thought was meditating at the time. And I don't remember exactly the moment I decided to add this into my daily life. I just felt called to start going inward, to learn what I had inside of me rather than keep focusing on the exterior world. because what I had learned about the outside world was expectation. It was order. Stay in your lane and don't cause problems. It had led me down some pretty intense and challenging paths. But what happened in Greece, the dreams, the visions, the words that didn't feel like they were coming from me, all of that came from the inside. And I wanted more of that. So I just started and I jumped into daily meditations. I had never meditated in my entire life until I got back from Greece because it felt pure. For the first time, I felt connected to the actual world around me, but I was doing it because it was inside of me. And when I got home and I started meditating, my wife actually took a photo of me sitting outside under the sun doing one of my first meditations after we got back. That picture means a lot to me because it's a reminder of the moment I started going inward, when I started feeling myself and letting go of the outside world and the expectations that were consistently presented to me. I got quiet with myself for the first time. So it was just me, a guy on a yoga mat, sitting by his pool here in Colorado. No special training, no guru. It's just a decision that I couldn't wait to do anymore. It was just something that was so deeply embedded within me that I had to move forward with it. But what does it mean to actually get quiet, right? Because when I sat down for the first time, my mind immediately started making grocery lists, replaying conversations, planning for tomorrow. The mind doesn't necessarily have an off switch. Nobody tells you that part. I was in a completely new territory, something that felt very foreign to who I had been. And honestly, I was like, I'm kind of turning into a little hippie. I'm woo-woo. What is going on here? It was a little out of character for the version of me I had spent years performing. The tattoo guy from Colorado sitting cross-legged in his backyard trying to hear himself think, or more accurately, trying to stop thinking long enough to hear something deeper. But I kept going. I started meditating outside in the mornings under the sun, learning to breathe, learning to keep coming back to my breath when my mind wandered, which was consistent all the time. I'm always having to remind myself, come back to center. I even went to a little Buddhist community with a few other people just to get some guidance or try to understand what I was experiencing. And I left with an appreciation for the practice, like a genuine curiosity, a new book called Becoming Yourself, and my feet completely asleep from sitting crisscross applesauce as a grown adult. Not exactly what I'd picture as a spiritual breakthrough, but I was invested. Something in me had cracked open in Greece, and I wasn't willing to let that close back up. And over time, meditation got easier, especially with guided meditations and music. I started learning about sound and frequency. I fell down the rabbit hole of somatics, the science of how sound creates visible geometric patterns in physical matter, and how those frequencies resonate with our bodies on a cellular level. I started following the Schumann resonance. I was watching solar activity, tracking sunspots and solar flares, and how shifts in the electromagnetic environment seemed to correlate with shifts in how I was feeling internally. I felt deeply connected to these things in a way I couldn't fully explain or justify. Even to this day, I am noticing more and more patterns with my body when the sun is shooting off these crazy solar flares. I feel it in my body. My bones hurt, my joints ache. I will have, weird stomach issues going on. I'll feel like hunger that I've never experienced before. And I'm correlating that with this rise in energy that is coming to the earth. I'm like a kid discovering something completely new and not being able to get enough of it. Every new piece of information felt like another dot connecting to the image I was slowly beginning to see. And here's something I want you to hear. Meditation doesn't have one right location or one right way. It doesn't require a special cushion or a silent room or years of practice before it works. It can happen outside in nature with the sun on your face, in your bed in those quiet minutes before you fully wake up, in your car after a long day when you need to come back to yourself before you walk through the front door. Wherever you can find the stillness, that's where it works. And the practice meets you where you are. You don't have to go somewhere special to find it. I've always been very drawn to water. And so I've now moved into most of my meditations occur when I'm in the shower. There's something about water that grounds me faster than anything else. I'll find a guided meditation relevant to where I'm at that day. Sometimes I need grounding. Sometimes I'm working through something heavy. Sometimes I'm just open and curious about what will surface. And I start my breath work in through my nose for 4 counts, out through my mouth for 6. And I give myself a mantra to return to when the mind tries to take over. And let me tell you, it happens almost every single time that I get deep into meditation. Because here's what nobody tells you. Your mind doesn't just go quiet. It fights. Even after over a year of daily practice, it still fights. Old thought patterns, worries, the mental to-do list. And when that happens, you just come back. Back to the breath, back to the mantra, no judgment, just return. And that returning, that is the practice. It's not the quiet, it's the returning. And we have to be patient with ourselves in that process. We are so conditioned to go, 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 go. Constant stimulation from every direction, our phones, the news, the noise of other people's opinions about how we should be living. Getting your brain to genuinely slow down and relax, it takes time. It takes consistency. It's just like going to the gym and choosing to work out. Your muscles hurt after a workout, but over time, those muscles begin to get stronger. That pain in those muscles starts to remove itself and you get stronger. You get more confident in the weight that you're lifting. Meditation is the same way. It takes consistency. It takes a willingness to sit in the discomfort of stillness when everything in you is trained to keep moving. But when you finally break through, and you will, it's worth everything it took to get there. Meditation has helped me with my mental health issues. It has brought me back to being present. I have healed past traumas through meditation. It brings you back to self that nothing else in the world can do. I think one of the biggest things that it's done is brought me back to myself. It's brought me back to the I am. And that's where meditation stopped being something I was trying and became something that I needed. Now, here's the science behind what was actually happening, because I think it matters to understand that this isn't just woo-woo or abstract or touchy-feely. This is real. There's a network in your brain called the default mode network. It's responsible for rumination, self-criticism, that inner loop that tells you you're not enough, that you haven't done enough, that you need to earn your place. Studies show that sustained meditation quiets that network measurably. The noise doesn't just feel like it settles. It actually does. You can see it on brain scans. That inner critic, the one that's been running that commentary of your life since you were old enough to understand shame, it genuinely quiets down. And as you go deeper, your brain waves begin to shift from beta, the busy thinking state most of us live in all day, down to theta, 4 to 8 cycles per second. That's the same state associated with deep creativity, vivid imagery, and the threshold between waking and dreaming. It's not mystical. It's neurological. It's science. It's facts. Your brain physically moves into a different gear. And that's when things start becoming visual for me. Geometric, specific in ways I wasn't expecting. I see lots of colors first, then movement, then patterns that feel deeply familiar, like I had seen them somewhere that I couldn't name. Sometimes I find myself watching myself outside of my body. Sometimes I'm taken somewhere I have never physically been to. And sometimes a guide will show up, or a version of myself that I did not yet recognize, maybe older, calmer, and more certain. And sometimes just abstract visuals and knowing information arriving without a sender. And when I come back from those meditations, I start documenting everything. Because some of the things that I see don't make a whole lot of sense, or the words that I hear that I know that I'm not speaking to myself that I'm hearing from some other source, I take those and I write them down because I'm being shared something that is taking me deeper. Every vision, every word, every image, because I was terrified of forgetting what was coming through. And so I called it my book of remembrance, because that is exactly what it feels like. Not learning something new, but I'm remembering something I already knew at a level that was deeper than my memory. And I know how that sounds. I also know what it feels like. And I want to be honest, I can't always tell you exactly what those experiences mean in the moment. When I receive a download, when I receive visuals, when I hear and feel things in that deep state, I don't always get immediate clarity. And sometimes I'm like, that was bizarre. I have no idea where that came from. But what I've learned is that clarification comes. That clarification comes sometimes within hours, and it comes sometimes within days or weeks. The universe has a way of confirming what was received in the conversation, a number, a moment so specific it can't be coincidence. And when you start meditating and when you start going inward and you start having these experiences, those coincidences show up more and more and more as confirmation that you are on the right path, that you are seeking your higher self. What I can tell you from a scientific perspective is that these experiences are consistent with what is happening in deep theta states. Whether that's purely neurological or something beyond it, I'll leave that question open, because I think that's where the most interesting territory lives. Right there in the space between what we can measure and what we can only feel. And I'm going to tell you, I felt crazy. I want to say that straight up with you. I felt crazy. I was genuinely thinking that I was losing my mind. Was I experiencing some kind of psychosis? Was I just really good at convincing myself of things that weren't real? But here's the paradox. It was simultaneously the realest thing I had ever experienced. Realer than any achievement, realer than any external validation I had ever received. I was connecting to something outside of myself that kept bringing me back to me, my true self, the one that had been there the whole time underneath everything the world had stacked on top of it. Some of the deepest sessions end with my whole body tingling. And that's your parasympathetic nervous system activating, your body physically shifting out of fight or flight into deep rest and repair. It takes several minutes to fully come back, and when I do, the world looks very different. It's more textured, it's more alive, like I can see the light inside of ordinary things, like everything around me is slightly more real than it was before I sat down. And slowly, dot by dot, I started to remember something. Not learn, not discover, but remember. I remember that I was never the character I had been playing, that underneath the performance, the hiding, the achieving, the proving, there was something that had always been there, just waiting for the moment when I finally let it out, and I let it breathe. I let it be free to be curious and let go of the weight of the world that had been placed upon me for so long. That's where the I am lives for me. Not in a concept, not a belief system. But in the moment I stopped being an actor in somebody else's story, I became the director of my own. I am actively participating on my terms. I want to tell you what actually changed. Not philosophically, not spiritually, but practically. Because I think that's where the real proof lives, not in the visions or the downloads or the moment of cosmic connection, but in the ordinary Tuesday, and how you show up for the people sitting across from you at dinner, and how quickly you recover when life knocks you sideways. So I did something I'd encourage you to do at some point in your own journey. I asked the people closest to me, what do you actually notice that's different? Not what do you think I want to hear, but what do you actually see from the outside looking in? The people that I asked, They said that I'm still kind, I'm still compassionate, but I'm no longer taking things that don't serve me simply because they're expected. That I hold my ground now without losing my warmth. And then this one kind of struck me a little bit deeper and it's a little more personal. But when I'm going through something or something hits me very differently, or that I'm really challenged by, that my downtimes are shorter than they used to be. That when I go through those hard, it's like something really, really hard, those moments or those events, I don't disappear in the way that I used to. Those were old ways of me protecting myself when something wasn't going the way that I want, or I was being challenged, or felt unheard, or that I was too much. I would go inward and I would get quiet, and sometimes I would be gone for weeks at a time, unable to communicate. My wife, Shauna, said that she can recognize when I'm triggered now, that instead of shutting down for days and going somewhere nobody could reach me, I can put into words what I'm feeling. I can say this is what's happening to me right now. I can stay present in the hard moments ahead instead of abandoning it and abandoning everyone else around. She said I'm more grounded, I'm more aware, and I'm more capable of tending to what actually needs tending. And then she said something simple that landed harder than anything else. You've gotten lighter. Not different, not rebuilt from scratch, not some new version of Justin that replaced the old one, just caring less. The same person, just not weighted down by everything I've been dragging behind me for decades. That's what the work actually produced. Not cosmic certainty, not a life free of difficulty, not some elevated state where nothing hurts anymore, just lighter, more present, a shorter time lost in shame spirals, more capable of showing up for the people I love in the moments that actually matter. And I want to be honest about one specific thing that changed, because I think it might be the most universally relatable part of this entire story. I have spent most of my life as a people pleaser. And I want to be clear about what that actually means, because it's not just about being nice. People pleasing is a survival strategy. It's learning early that if you can manage everyone else's emotional state, you stay safer. You stay more loved. You earn your place in the room in which you're standing. It becomes so automatic that you stop noticing that you're actually doing it. You just know that your job is to make sure nobody around you is uncomfortable, even at your own expense. Letting go of that has been genuinely hard, because it is not what you might think. It wasn't hard because I stopped caring about people. I still care deeply. I'm a very empathic, emotional person. If anything, I would say that I care more now because the caring is real rather than strategic. The difficulty is learning to let other people navigate their own emotional responses to my choices. Learning to hold a boundary and let someone else be disappointed without immediately moving to fix their disappointment. That is their work. It's not mine. And my intent has never been to hurt anyone. It never will be. But I have learned, slowly and imperfectly, with a lot of backsliding, that honoring myself isn't the same as abandoning others. It just feels that way at first. Because for so long, the two things were fused together in my nervous system. Putting myself first felt like a betrayal, like something bad would happen, like I'd finally lose all the love I've been working so hard to earn. And here's what I've discovered on the other side of that fear. The love didn't go anywhere. If anything, it got more real, because I stopped performing it and I started actually living inside it. That realization didn't come from meditation. It came from getting quiet enough to finally hear the difference between my actual values and the fear that had been running the show while pretending to be my values. This awareness didn't make me immune to being human. And I want to say that very clearly, because I think spiritual content can accidentally create an unrealistic picture. Like awareness is a destination you arrive at and then everything gets easier. That's not how it works. At least it doesn't work that way for me. I still have moments where my human shows up and makes a mess. I still get triggered. I still feel the pull of old patterns. I still have days where the noise gets loud and the ground feels less solid than it did the day before. That's being a human. That's having a human experience. But what has changed for me is the recovery time and the meaning I make of the hard parts. Because here's what I've come to believe, and I hold this loosely. What if we're here specifically for the experience? All of it. Not just the beautiful parts, not just the moments of connection and clarity and cosmic downloads, but the hard Tuesday, the argument you didn't handle well, the old pattern that shows up again when you thought you were past it. What if those moments aren't evidence that you're failing? What if they're actually the whole point? We spend so much energy trying to get past the difficult parts of being human, trying to transcend the emotions, bypass the pain, skip ahead to the version of ourselves that has it figured out. But what if the figuring out only happens inside the difficulty? What if the hard parts aren't obstacles to your growth? What if they are the growth? When I stopped labeling my experiences as good or bad and started just seeing them as experiences, as information, as texture, as part of a full landscape of being alive, that's when something truly shifted. Not the experiences themselves, they didn't get easier, but the weight I was assigning them changed completely. The shame that used to come with the struggle started to loosen its grip, because struggle stopped meaning I was broken and started meaning I was human. This journey hasn't given me answers. And I want to be honest about that. If anything, it's given me better questions and a deeper curiosity about what's actually happening here in this life, in this body, in this moment in time, and a more grounded place to stand while I keep looking. That feels like enough. More than enough, actually. I don't know everything that's happening, and I'm not going to pretend that I do. But I know this. The version of reality we've been handed is not the complete picture. There is more to you than your job title, your tax bracket, your political affiliation, your diagnosis, your trauma, and even your past. There is more to this human experience than what fits neatly inside the story we've been told to accept without questioning. And I think a lot of you feel that. And I think that's what's actually why you're here listening to this. Something in you already knows that the map you were given doesn't match the territory you're actually standing in. And I'm not asking you to believe what I believe. I'm not asking you to meditate or follow solar flares or start a book of remembrance or do anything that I have described today. It's just one person's honest account of what is happening when he finally got quiet enough to hear himself. I'm just asking you one question. What if the most radical thing you could do right now, in this world, in this moment, in this life that is genuinely yours and no one else's, is get quiet enough to remember who you actually are? Not who they told you to be. Not who you've been performing to. Not the version of yourself that was built to survive the room you grew up in, but the thing underneath all of it. The part that was there before the world got loud. Before the blueprint, before the boxes, before the noise. That part isn't lost. It never was. It's just been waiting for you to get quiet enough to hear it. And it's been incredibly patient.